Okay, that's where we do stop fake among other places, so please come on with me. Yeah, stop fake is a fact-checking and verification project which is mostly internet-based. So we were the first project like this which is using fact-checking for the tackling of propaganda. There were a lot different other fact-checking projects around, but none of them was specifically dealing with the problem of propaganda. So we are taking pieces from Russian propaganda and verify them, and if we find them not to be true, we debunk that and explain why this article is not true. So far we already have more than 1,000 stories which we verified as to be totally untrue, totally false, and we use different channels like websites, social media to get those stories delivered to audiences around the world.
Okay, and you are the creator of...
I'm one of the co-creators, so we initially had a team of probably 5 or 7 people who started the project, and all of them were belonging to Mohila School of Journalism, former students, faculty, current students, and we've been thinking about what we can do to tackle the rising amount of propaganda, and that was our answer to that. So we started with a very basic website in 2014 and been doing that like article by article. Then we added some other languages, so we started with Russian, then we added English and added some other. Now we have a total of 10 languages. We started to use very different social media platforms as well. We started to do a video journal, then a radio program, and now the very latest addition to this is a newspaper which is published for Donbass area. So basically that's like Stop Fake, but for offline audience, for those people who still more accustomed to read traditional newspapers and do not have much access to internet. So the project was growing from 5, as I mentioned at the beginning, to 29 today. So this is a big team, but we are not kind of newsroom stuck. All members of our team are working somewhere, some people even in other countries. For example, editors of our foreign language services are mostly working in those countries which they cover, and it's very good position for us, because then we can not only translate our materials into other languages, but we also can monitor what happens in other countries with media, and also take the stories from there and also influence the narrative which is shaped in different countries. I would not say that there are projects like this even outside of Ukraine. There are some NGOs in different East European countries and Baltic states which are dealing specifically with issues of propaganda in their countries, but none of them are doing that on such a regular basis and delivering every day the new items. So they are mostly doing analysis and kind of long form kind of research of that, but we are doing that on a kind of daily basis, and this is very important because we want to be the archive of propaganda. So every person who would be interested in the future what Russian propaganda was look like, they can come back to our website and look at it on a day-to-day basis, and we also include the list of media which participated in spreading of those fakes, so people can also understand how huge this system was. I do think it's working because one of our first aims was to raise the awareness about propaganda, and we've been doing that very hard for last almost 3 years, again on a day-to-day basis, and it was very difficult at the very beginning to explain to people that this is a dangerous thing and it can influence events not only in Ukraine, it can work across the whole Europe and in other parts of the world. So it took time for us to build this narrative. Yeah, I would say so, because Maidan was important in terms of the rising of the civil society of Ukraine, and Stop Fake is just another example of the civil society involvement. Even though all our team are professional journalists, but how we organize that and been running it as a volunteer project at the very beginning, it's example of this civil society, post-Maidan inspiration. And another connection to Maidan was that actually the avalanche of propaganda started not even with the Crimea events or the war in the East, but with Maidan. That was kind of the initial stages of the growing propaganda. And at that point, it was already clear that there is a huge external involvement in shaping the narrative about what is happening in Ukraine. I don't think there is Ukrainian propaganda, because Ukraine has very diverse media system, and if you would be reading to very different media, you would get very different picture of what is happening, not only the governmental position, but many other positions which are available around, and that's for domestic consumption. And for external consumption, for international audience, Ukrainian government was not producing any narratives at all. And if there would be Ukrainian propaganda, I am sure that Russians would immediately create another Stop Fake which would be debunking Ukrainian propaganda. And as soon as in 3 years we didn't see the rise of the project like that, we only hear that Ukraine is also doing the same and all other accusations, but so far we haven't seen any proofs of that. So I would say that there is no Ukrainian system of propaganda when government is saying to journalists what to say and how to interpret that or another event. I would not say that we see the change in the amount of propaganda. So the amount of propaganda actually, of fakes, actually depends on what happens on the ground. So if we see the growing tensions in the front line, if we see the next stage of Normandy talks or Minsk negotiations or any other thing, so that immediately brings the rise in the amount of fakes, because fakes and propaganda are used as a information warfare support for the political actions, military actions or diplomatic actions. So it's all connected to what is really happening on the ground. So that's why we can use the analysis of our fakes even to predict what might happen next, because we already see the patterns how propaganda was used before.